Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm your host, Terry, coming to you from my luxurious hotel room. So I'm not gonna do any history or anything today, but because I wanted to finish up on talking about WEL Companies and what you could expect if you went there. So let me explain that, what you just saw. I've been buying so the company that I'm going to, they just give us, they say you can spend $20 on lunch, which is pretty generous. And so we just order every day from this restaurant. And this restaurant just happens to have, they'll deliver 2-liter bottles of Coke products. So as part of my $20, because $20 is a lot of food, even now, that would be like a giant pizza and a soda. So I just got like a 8-inch sub, and that was, I don't know, like maybe $10, and I was like, give me a 2-liter Diet Coke. And I've done that both days so far, and so I got a spare one because, and the other thing is that there's deposits on every bottle in New York State. So anyway, so that's why I have all these big bottles, and then I just fill up my cup with ice, and I got one in the fridge. So I wanted to finish kind of talking about WEL, and and just, this is just information, right? It's like, I don't have a ton of, I was not happy with my experience there, but like I said, people there are nice. And for some folks, it probably works good. Like, they're almost like local drivers for this company, like if they're at one of the terminals. And it's like anything else. Like, people get used to things, and then they're just like, oh, well, that's what I'm gonna do. And they don't want to look around for something else, or they're just satisfied with the status quo. I'm not that type of person. I'm constantly looking for improvement, but that's, that was just like how I was in the military, and it's how a lot of people are in the military. Hey, let's get better at what we're doing. And same thing when I practice law. It's like, I can't, I got to keep up with the times, right? I got to get better. I got to get, I got to embrace technology, whatever it is. I got to stay on top of court cases. And so to me, and I said this to Dennis Davis at Prime one time, and he agreed with me. Not that he ever put it into action, but I said, if you're not getting better every day, you're getting worse. And I've said this before. There's a lot of old farts in the trucking industry that want to do stuff like they did in the 1970s. And one example that was at WEL, but it's also at almost the only company I've been at that didn't use bubble sheets or some kind of cover sheet for a load was GP Transco. And it made total sense, right? You tap on the load that you're going to scan, and then you scan the bills. Why do you need a cover sheet? They already know who it's coming from, what truck it was. They know what trailer it was, or at least they should, right? Because that information is automatically uploaded when you do your loaded call. And so why do they need a bubble sheet? And the answer is, I don't know. And the company I'm going to, we just practiced filling out their cover sheet yesterday. They say they're going to go away from it hopefully by December, because theirs is even more detail that's useless, like hub miles, or mileage, start and finish mileage. Who cares, right? It's like, it's not a metric that needs to be tracked. It certainly doesn't need to be tracked for IFTA, because that's a whole different thing. But anyway, I wanted, getting back to WEL. So it's probably been about 3 weeks ago, and I'll show you the letter. But this guy named Dalton Thielens, he's a Nepo baby. He's like third generation at the company. It's the Thielens company. He sent out a letter, a 2-page letter, and here's what it looked like, so you could see that I got a copy of it. So that letter was basically a new policy, and it was kind of weird because it talked about. So the opening paragraph there talks about how the fuel costs for the company have gone up from $832,000 a month to $1.337 million per month, and that opening paragraph struck me as weird, not because you wouldn't be concerned about that as an executive at a company, but I've never seen a company talk about money and talk about expenses, to the employees, because that information's coming in a vacuum. I mean, sure, it sounds like going from $830,000 to $1.3 million, which is a $500,000 increase. Sounds like a lot, but if most truck drivers are not going to have a sense of what that equals per truck, and what that equals per mile, etc. So then they're like, yeah, this is really bad, or he said this, this is really bad, and we got to get a handle on this. So he outlined 3 things that he thought would help those numbers. The first thing was you had to increase your miles per gallon, or every driver had to have at least 7.78 miles per gallon. Now, if you're at a company that doesn't run 74 miles an hour, you probably know that achieving like 8, 8.3, 8.8, 9 is not that hard with modern trucks. Right? And I'm pretty sure that the whole time I was there, I was not below 7.78, despite not really caring about the speed I drove. But so, and then, in that paragraph about mileage, he was like, and if you don't do that, we're going to basically call you in and do counseling. And if you can't get your act together, you might get terminated, essentially. So the second thing that he said was people needed to have their idle time at 20% or less. I was like, 20%? That's like really, really high for idle time. But I think one of the things that happens at a company like WEL is that people sit around so much, and they sit around in places that are not that friendly to controlling the climate in your truck using just the APU. I don't know if Mr. Thielen's, I'll show you. Here's a picture of Dalton. By the way, he doesn't live in Wisconsin where the company is headquartered. He actually lives down in Missouri. He went to the University of Missouri. I was like, what is he? Why doesn't he just work at Prime? But here's a picture of him. This is, here's a picture of him. You can find him on LinkedIn too. But anyway, I was like, 20% is a lot. But one of the things that I noticed is I sat around a lot. And I often sat around in places that were, over this past summer, I sat around in like Central Florida when it was like 100 degrees down there. I sat around McDonough, Georgia when it was hot as Hades down there. And, I don't know if Dalton Thielen's understands that these trucks are not actually insulated. I mean, any insulation they have is perfunctory. And so when you're sitting in a truck in a lot with no shade or, anything blocking the sun is just beating down on that truck and it's heating up the inside of it. And because of the way they're designed, right, the heat does go up, but at some point the heat starts to just come down and the APU is not going to be enough to, even with the curtains closed, like you could park away from the sun, like in other words, you could face east and north during the afternoon and your truck's still going to get really hot inside. So it doesn't surprise me that people idle a lot. And they do have idle cutout, which tells me that people are in places. Like, I'll be honest with you, there were times where I needed to sleep during the day, and my truck would idle for several hours at a truck stop because it was that hot out. And like I said, the APUs don't really keep up. So that was the second thing. The third thing that he talked about was using the mandated fuel stops. So we get a load, we get a fuel solution. Well, one of the reasons I think people ignore the fuel stops is because sometimes they're totally like out in left field. And when I first got to the company, I was like, okay, I'm a company driver. I gotta do what they say. And so I started noticing, though, that I would have fuel stops that were out of route. And when I say out of route, I mean they would give us, you tap in where you're going and it would give you a route. Well, then the fuel stop is like up and back. And the first couple of times I had a fuel stop was at some crappy TA in Burns Harbor, Indiana, but that wasn't on my route. And it was probably about 30 miles out of route. Well, I get paid by the mile, like most of the drivers that aren't leased there. And, so I said to my DM, I said, hey, I've had these couple of fuel stops that are out of route. Am I getting paid for going out of route? Because, you see the mileage, right? It's like, HHG mileage. And she's like, no, but we're working on that. I'm like, oh, well, why is it that you're working on it? Just fix it. Because, it's basically like saying, hey, you have a stop that's, you're not going on the most direct route from the 01 to the 90 because we have a 02 stop for you, and not wanting to pay for going off course to get to that second stop. And in one case, in several cases, after I got the dispatch, the fuel solution would change. And I know that because I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, it says I should go here for fuel. I go there for fuel, but I'm not watching, I'm driving, right? So you can't look at that load information. So I get to the fuel stop, and of course, because I'm stopped, I'm like changing my logs, etc. And then I notice that the fuel stop is now a different place than where I got off the highway. It's not even the same exit. It's like 50 miles farther. And so, in those cases, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. I already got off the highway. I'm already sitting in a line behind two trucks. I'm not going to get back on the highway and do this all over again. So I would just get fuel there. One time, though, I was on a load from Boston to Allentown. I was supposed to T-call this load in Allentown. Now, this load may have been going farther west, like out to Illinois or Wisconsin or whatever. But the fuel stop they gave me was, and you know where Boston is, you know where Allentown, Pennsylvania is, but you also probably know where Carlisle, Pennsylvania is, and really like New Kingston, which is the Miracle Mile where 81 and 76, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, where they cross, right? You get off, you go down a mile, and you get back on the Turnpike or get back on 81, vice versa. Well, that's about 100 miles beyond where I was supposed to drop. But if I was just this mindless drone following instructions, I would have driven 100 miles past my drop point and then 100 miles back. Of course, I ignored it. But I don't think that, and these are computer generated, I think. And I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. But what I do know is almost every fuel stop, not everyone, but probably half of them are in the crappiest truck stops you can find. Like and there's a reason why they want you to stop there, because let's be honest, the cheapest fuel often is at the crappiest truck stops. That's just how it is. In fact, sometimes you get some of these older TAs, they don't even have DEF at every pump. And so I looked at these three, and by the way, if you didn't do that or you didn't do the idle properly, you were going to get a counseling sheet and you might get fired. But what I realized is that Dalton Thielens really doesn't know how a trucking company operates, even though he's like the CEO of a trucking company. And, I was like, dude, you have trucks that go way faster than almost any other decent sized company on the road. And, I've talked about this, right? Like I was telling people, the only people that passed me routinely there were probably a couple of tanker companies, that are pretty much only tankers, super truckers with their gear shift up here, and then like some piece of crap white Volvo or Freightliner with a rented trailer, flying down the road with no mud flaps. That's about it. It's not that hard, right? Like, if they would just slow their trucks down, and they could still be running faster than most other fleets out there. They could slow down to 68 and still be running faster than most big fleets. And they could save tens of thousands of dollars on fuel in a week instead of this stuff that he's proposing. And then the other thing that was in that letter that I thought was kind of disconnected from this other fuel stuff was that CSA score. And again, we're going to bring you in and you better take this seriously, blah blah blah. I'm like, well, I bet if you reduced your fleet speed, you would improve your CSA score. Just spitballing here. But the other thing that I said this to somebody that was in-house at the company, I said, this letter just reeks of panic. And I don't know. I mean, they clearly don't have enough loads for the drivers they have, yet they're trying to like hire more people and even giving an extra bonus for recruiting more people, although it was ridiculous. But it just seemed like this guy didn't have a handle on what was going on. And if there was that, I don't know if that jump was 1 month or not, because it didn't really say. But if you're an executive at a trucking company, you have to be watching trends constantly and then reacting to them. But this letter just seemed like desperation. It's like, oh shit, we're in a pickle. We were asleep at the switch and now we're $1.3 million into fuel every month and we really can't afford that extra $500,000 and it's getting away from us. That was my impression. It was like, asleep at the switch is kind of how I took it, and it seemed panicky. So I don't know if there's something more going on at the company, but I just don't think the company's well run. I think there are so many inefficiencies, and they waste so much money. Yet at the same time, they don't really pay good. And I'll give you some examples of wasting money that happened to me. And I was just like, are you guys serious? Like, this is just so dumb. But let me give you an example. So at the end of July in Wisconsin, you had to have a new cab card and a new sticker for your license plate. So they sent out a message and they're like, yeah, these cab cards and stickers are at all the terminals. Well, that's not true. And you could only get the stickers and cab cards if you just happened to show up at a terminal during banker's hours. But if you showed up at 7 o'clock at night, there's no printer, there's no, stickers, there's nothing. You can't get anything till morning, till one of the office workers comes in. And so I thought that was kind of stupid because they act like trucking's not a 24/7 job. But then this is when my driver manager was on her 2.5 week vacation. And I was dealing with this other guy, and he was like, well, you need to get a sticker and a cab card. And I was like, okay, well, I've been to the terminal in McDonough, wasn't able to get one because, nobody was there. And I've been to Joliet when nobody was there. And so he said, well, you need to stop by Now this is when I was on a trip, so I had already planned the trip. He routes me to Joliet. I don't get paid for this, by the way. He's like, we'll give it to the security guard. So guess what happens? I go down I-55, go over to the terminal in Joliet. I pull up to the gate, and the security guys are cool. It's just a couple of older guys. And I said, hey, do you have a cab card and a sticker for that I was supposed to pick up here? He's like, no, nobody gave me anything. I was like, yeah, I'm sure they didn't. So I go back, because I was actually on my way to Missouri, and I wouldn't have gone that way. I was going to go down 39. So the next day I said, yeah, nobody left anything for me. And then he says, yeah, they probably don't have them there anyway. They probably don't have the stickers. I'm like, why would you send me why don't you even know what's going on? You're supposed to be the driver manager. You don't know what's going on. And so then I had this problem with the trailer light. But when I say problem, what I mean is it's like one of those 7 lamp, it's got like 7 LEDs in it. One of those kind of tail lights on a utility trailer. So I noticed that I picked this trailer up, but only 3 of the LEDs were illuminated. Now, DOT regulations, I still had a tail light, I still had brake lights, I still had a light that worked, right? But it's a system with some redundancy built in. So I sent a message to emergency roadside service, and I said, hey, what's the standard here? Like at what point do you want this light replaced? And they're like, oh, go here and have it replaced. Well, then I got tied up in traffic. I couldn't get it replaced at this one Love's, and because they were like, yeah, we can't take it till tomorrow morning, but I needed to leave at like 3 in the morning. So I didn't get it fixed, but I wasn't worried about it because I was like, hey, this light works, right? It doesn't work. It's not 100%, but it still meets the standard. So, I keep heading west. Well, I deliver in like southern Wisconsin. Then the ERS, but I have a load to pick up out in Abbotsford. So, mind you, I still haven't gotten the sticker or cab card. Well, I did have the cab card electronically. And I should back up and tell you that I said to this driver manager, hey, I can stop at the Love's in Upper Sandusky tomorrow, and if you FedEx a cab card and a sticker, I can pick it up there. And I sent him the physical address so he could FedEx that stuff to me. He goes, oh, we wouldn't do that. Now, mind you, it's almost the end of the month. They haven't made these things available, okay? So now it's like August 1st. I have the cab card, I just don't have the sticker. So the emergency roadside service says, you gotta, I was just checking the time. You gotta take that trailer to Love's in Oak Creek, Wisconsin and get this fixed. I'm like, okay, well, I'll be late to my next, load. And it was a drop and hook, so it was like, okay, that doesn't really matter. So then I go to Oak Creek to get this light fixed. And because I said to him, I said, I'm going to drop this trailer in Oak Creek. You could have somebody go over there and fix it, right? Because I don't know what they have for, roadside or whatever. And I'm like, then it doesn't, I can keep moving and the trailer's going to be sitting there. It can get fixed. No. You got to go to Love's. I'm like, okay, so I go to Love's and it's going to take, like 6 hours to get this tail light changed. So while I'm there at Love's, my DM, who's now back from vacation, and I got to tell you that while she was gone, communication was like non-existent. It was like pulling teeth to get a hold of anybody. It was just, It's like, if people can't pick up and fill in for other driver managers, that just hire more driver managers so that, it's like when you have barely enough people to do the job, and then one of them goes on vacation, it's like people like me are just out abandoned, kind of. That's what it felt like. So anyway, I'm at Oak Creek getting this light change. My driver manager, who's now back from vacation, says, "Hey, you got your cab card and sticker, right?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't." She's like, "Oh, well, you're gonna have to come up to De Pere and get it." That is way out of route. So I said, "Are you gonna pay me for coming up there?" I said, "Because it's not like I didn't try to get this. It's not like I didn't offer solutions. I figured out how to get it in my hands, and I was rejected. And I did everything I was told to do." She's like, "Yeah, I'll pay you for coming up here. I'll just add it to the trip." I'm like, "Okay." So I go to De Pere. But by this time, now it's kind of jacked up my clock, and I'm not going to be able to go from south of Milwaukee up to basically Green Bay and then back out to Abbotsford, Wisconsin, on the clock that I have. So I go up to De Pere, I go to the shop, and there's just a stack of papers sitting there, and I rifle through it, and I find my hard copy cab card. And then I said, "Hey, I need a sticker." And then the dude's like, seriously, like, he's like, "Where'd those stickers go?" Like, and here's the thing about these stickers. The stickers, it's not like there's some like plutonium, right, that you got to keep a close grip on. It wouldn't matter if somebody got stickers and gave them to people that didn't pay for them. And here's why. Because if you don't have the matching cab card, and I don't know that any cop or DOT officer has ever gone out and looked at the plate on the front of my truck to see that the sticker was up to date. I mean, they asked for the cab card, certainly, but then they're like, "Okay, this thing's registered." I don't care if you got a stupid sticker on your license, on the plate. But even if I had a sticker on there, without the cab card that matches the truck and all the other information, it's not like cops or DOT officers pull you over because they're like, "Oh, that sticker from that out-of-state truck." I mean, it's just ridiculous. And this just illustrates how inefficient and poorly run the company is, right? Like, they had me go out of route several times to get something because they just couldn't manage leaving out a stack of papers. Because like, is somebody going to steal my cab card? No. And if you were like, you didn't want to print all of them because you're like, "Oh, that's a waste of paper." Although, even if they did it at all the terminals, it would have been like 3 extra reams of paper. I mean, come on, this is a big company, right? But even if they didn't do that, they could just have a computer. They don't even have computers for the drivers to use at any of the terminals. Like, no, we don't have just some cheap ass desktop with a printer where you could sit down and do something like other companies do, And so I was just like, so you route me, I have to drive, and that trip was probably an extra 200 miles up to De Pere. And then here's the other crazy thing. Because my fleet manager and roadside couldn't work together, and nobody's talking to anybody, the company had to spend like $300 at Lowe's to get a taillight replaced on a trailer, and then turned around and the driver manager ordered me to go to the terminal and to the shop. Like, I could have just, if she would have been on top of things, she could have said, "No, I don't want him going to Love's because he's going to have to come up here with that trailer anyway, and he can just swap it out." Because really, that's what I could have done. I could have just, instead of wasting all those hours in Oak Creek, I could have driven straight to De Pere, dropped that trailer, picked up one that was already serviced and ready to roll, got the sticker and left and got to Abbotsford before my clock expired. But those are little things that multiplied over hundreds of drivers really cost companies a lot of money. And I really think that they are very, very poor at a lot of things. And when margins are tight, when the cargo is, there's not a lot of cargo to haul, the most efficient operations are going to be the ones that are more likely to survive. The leanest operations, the people that can get the most done with the least amount of resources, and that is not WEL Companies. It's not, at least from what I saw. And so I'm going to do one more video about them and talk about some other experiences and show you some other videos and stuff. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I will, so today's Wednesday. I got a couple more days of orientation, and I'm learning some good things about this company. By the way, this company that I'm going to actually pays you if you have to do a 34 on the road. Not if you want to, but like if you ran so hard that you're out of hours and you got to do a 34 on the road, they actually pay you for it. And this is the first company I've ever seen that does that. So I thought that was cool. But I'll talk about that in a different video. But anyway, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.